and justice. Help the leaders here tonight to use their authority to serve faithfully and to promote the general welfare of all people. Thank you for the gift of this land and its beauty. We pray that we would be good stewards of what you have blessed us with. Guide the proceedings of this meeting and fill our words with grace and understanding. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Ferguson. I got an email from Mr. Jordan this afternoon indicating that something's come up and he would not be here, a business matter. So he's excused, and Madam Clerk, you can otherwise call the roll.
Lois Burry. Here. Brian Hirchin.
Here.
Julie Spear. Here. Joel Hirchin. Here. Bill Peavy.
Here.
Gerald Peterson.
Here.
Charlie Grant.
Here.
Tom Dowd.
Here.
Chuck Mills.
Here.
Richard King.
Here.
Wallace Habhager.
Here.
John Mortensen.
Here.
Esther Wentz.
Here.
Jean Ritz.
Here.
Gordon Ossum.
Here.
Tom Kaflish.
Here.
Chuck Strumke.
Here.
Richard Marzloff.
Here.
Sharon Norton Ballman.
Here.
Ron Troyer.
Here.
Roger Rebholz.
Here.
Bill Cranmer. Daryl Standifer.
Here.
John Borup.
Here.
Clarence Malick.
Here.
Don Jordan is absent. Ron Raymond.
Here.
Cindy Leonard.
Here.
Linda Lucky.
Here.
Stan Kruger.
Here.
Denise Gunderson.
Here.
30 present with Mr. Jordan absent. Let us hear now from the Administrative Coordinator, Mr. Chuck Whiting.
Well, good evening. Oh, thank you. Yes. Okay. Let's maintain some order here. Okay. Just a couple of things. I'll keep this relatively short because I know you have other things you'd like to do tonight. I'm going to keep talking every meeting about where we are in the budget process. Friday, I believe between myself and Michelle, we're going to be handing out the budget instructions that were approved at the Finance Committee meeting to the department heads, so that they can get going on some of the basics. There's not a lot changes in there as far as the mechanics of what they need to do. Generally, they're most anxious about when the software is ready for them to start inputting data, and that'll likely happen sometime next month. Then the committees will start seeing and hearing more specifics from their department heads at their committee meetings. A couple things to note. Many of you recall that we have had some issues with the DOT regarding the value of the property that was taken in New Richmond for the highway project up there. We are going to be having some discussions regarding that with them, more formal discussions later in this year. I'm notified of that in the last 10 days or so. A few other things that we have to do internally. The Personnel Committee, I'm going to be talking to the 3-member negotiating team that was approved in April, so that we can get going on the law enforcement contracts. We should probably have a meeting sometime in early July on that. I'll talk to those 3 members here shortly. Let's see. We have selected Mr. Scott Ginter to be the county's first classification compensation specialist. This is the position that was created and approved by this board a couple of months ago to work on what we refer to as the Springstead project. He will be starting next Monday. He was the consensus candidate, comes with some strong background in this very sort of thing, and I'm looking forward to having him start. I think he'll be a very good fit with the staff that we have. And after the last county board meeting with the issues that we had with the computer and the projector, that we have had some discussions, and staff is looking at what kind of improvements we might be able to make to the hardware and the software to make this a little bit easier to make presentations and so forth. Board members might take note, this is also the first meeting with the new camera system. There's a camera up there, so always smile when you're looking forward, and when you turn around you can smile at that camera. There are guys in that room over there that are watching what's going on and getting it ready for television, so we won't see the standing camera over here anymore. But yes.
Does it have a constant audio feed now, so that even when the mics are off, that it feeds?
You still have to turn your microphones on.
Okay, great.
To follow up on that, the cable company is planning to install microphones of their own, but they aren't in yet. So they're still dependent on our sound system.
Okay, that's my report. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Whiting? Thank you for your report then. Reviewing the agenda, you will notice since the last one that was sent to you last week, we have drawn a line through the committee and department report item for the Bass Lake Rehabilitation District. We learned yesterday or so that the person who was going to speak on that is not available tonight. Hopefully we'll hear of their report in August. And I had a request earlier this evening that seemed reasonable to put number 6 in front of number 3 under our old and new business, so I'm planning to do that, all of the things being equal. Other than that, the agenda is probably going to be just as you see it, and hopefully it won't be an unduly long meeting. That puts us, I think, ready for the consent agenda. Does anybody want anything removed from the consent agenda, or are we ready for a motion to adopt it?
I move to adopt.
Mr. Strumke moves to adopt. Mr. Mortensen is a second. All in favor of adopting the consent agenda, please vote aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. We have made appointments since the last meeting. Mr. King and I conferred and agreed on the appointment of Art Fireisen and Judith Harrison to the Council on Aging. And to the Fair Board, Supervisor Ritz is replacing Supervisor Peavy by their agreement and ours for that matter. We're ready now for old and new business, the resolution approving farmland preservation program applications of the Bonsons and of the Simonsons in the towns of Pleasant Valley and Forest respectively. Mr. Raymond, is this yours?
Yeah, I'll move it to the floor. I think you've got the resolution in your possession. I think we've had a dearth of farmland preservation applications, and now recently I think we were in a couple of months ago with 3, and we've got 2 more. This is farmers that place their land commit to farmland preservation for a period of like 10 years, and they get certain tax advantages, and in return they've got to operate the farm consistent with the farmland preservation in their farm plan. So committee adopted it unanimously, and we recommend the board do the same.
Are there any questions about this resolution? In that case, all who are in favor should now vote aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. And it passes unanimously. The next item is number 2 on our agenda, the resolution authorizing an application for grant funds to replace the boat landing at Pine Lake County Park. There was this evening a yellow memorandum handed about, and I believe this is you again, Mr. Raymond?
Yes, I'll move it to the floor.
Second from Mr. Peavy.
Okay, this is for the boat landing in Pine Lake. Bob Heisey prepared a handout for you. The boat landing is, the money for the improvement is in our 2006 plan, pending application and approval of the grant money. Boat landing's deteriorating. It's an important issue to get it fixed before we have any difficulties out there. So we expect the grant will be approved, but nothing's guaranteed. So our committee approved it unanimously, and we recommend the county board do the same.
And if the grant should not be approved, we would not spend our part of the money either. Is that the usual understanding?
Yes, but the money is, in this case, the money is in the budget, so we won't be, if it is approved, we don't come back for more money.
Quite so. Any questions, or Mr. Strumke?
I didn't quite follow that answer. If the grant is not approved, are we or are we not going to spend the money that's already in the budget?
We would not spend any money.
Okay.
But if it is approved, it will not come back to the board again.
Just in some grants in the past, the money has not been provided in the budget, and we've made sure that the grant application assures that we're not obligating the county board. In this case, we have the money in the budget and would intend to go forward if the grant's approved.
Ms. Spear?
Question, the yellow sheet says that Corp Council has reviewed this resolution, but he has not signed it.
I've reviewed it.
Are there any other questions? In that case, all who are in favor of passing this should now vote aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Let's hear number 6 then, the presentation by Kim Chapman with respect to Conservation Design Land Division Standards. Someone doing an introduction? Mr. Fedrozi, I'll bet.
I'll do it here since Kim is there. For the better part of 3 years prior to last December, our committee, department, several other departments and agencies of the county board worked on a sizable ordinance package, and one of the most important features of that ordinance package were adding policies and procedures and standards to allow for conservation design subdivisions. With the adoption of that ordinance package last December, we were excited to see how soon and what type of development proposals might come forward. And we were very pleased to see that we had a concept for such a development within the first few weeks of the year. We reviewed that at the concept stage within the department. We liked what we saw. We were excited with the response that we took it to our committee a couple of months ago and had the project presented to the Planning and Zoning Committee. The committee was excited enough with the results that they said unanimously the whole board ought to see what this is all about. So tonight we have with us Dr. Kim Chapman, who is a principal ecologist with Applied Ecological Services, Inc., who is a consultant hired by the developers of the Rolling Hills Farm subdivision, who are with us tonight. Dave Peters and Steve Bryant are the principals in this development. And they've hired Dr. Chapman to do the design, the front-end work, to prepare the layout and package up all of the conservation design aspects of this development. So tonight, Kim is going to review the development briefly with the board, so you can see what might have happened with a conventional development and what they're proposing to do with a conservation design development. Kim?
Thank you, Dave.
It's different.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Yes, sir.
People cannot hear it, and I'm sure it's the fault of our equipment. So please work from Mr. Chapman, Dr. Chapman, and hopefully the clicker will advance your slides at the right
Okay,
time.
all right. We're having technological difficulties. So as I was saying, I'm going to walk you through the thinking behind conservation development design, because you designed the ordinance, but you haven't actually seen what it's going to produce. And so what I'm going to show you tonight is exactly what you will get out of that ordinance. Just to refresh your memories, number of key points in the ordinance are aggregation of open space. 65% of the land surface is to remain in open space. Smaller lot sizes. And with smaller lot sizes, of course, you can aggregate open space. Ecological management of stormwater in order to protect downstream resources, and a number of other things. So this looks familiar, I'm sure. This is what the yield plan was, and it would have been the traditional approach to developing this 140-acre parcel just west of Hammond. If you could advance it, this doesn't seem to be working. Thank you. The site itself is on J and 160th. We're looking north onto the property. This is the property boundary. There's an elk farm and a couple of residences at the south portion of the property. Here we are at the southeast corner looking east towards Hammond. Hammond is at the distant hill there, so we're a couple of miles west of Hammond. Looking the other direction, off to the left, and we'll see in a moment, is the south branch of the Kinnickinnick. This is up in the northwest corner of the property looking diagonally, I'm sorry, excuse me, we're on J at the south end of the property looking across the field to the south towards the south branch of the Kinnickinnick, which is in the distant trees there. We're now up on the northwest corner of the property looking south. The tree at the bottom, the tree line at the bottom of the hill is the south branch of the Kinnickinnick, and the property in question is to the left. To the right, you'll see a more traditional form of development where you put houses on larger lots and where all the open space is owned privately, as opposed to what you will see in a moment where the open space is owned in common. One last shot, and this is the northwest corner of the property. Just off to the east there, you can see the garage of an individual who owns land up there just to the northwest corner of the property. All right, so really the process of conservation and development design is to let the land tell you where the roads and the lots are to go. We are trying to put half-acre lots on this property, and there are a number of considerations. We originally were allowed 63 lots with the bonus of 25 that brought us up to 77 half-acre lots with roads. One of the very first things we look at is the soils. Soils tell us a lot about where we can infiltrate and filter our stormwater runoff in order to eliminate the sediment, the phosphorus, the nitrogen, and the pulses that come, the flood pulses that come when you increase the amount of impervious surface and lawn on a development. And what you see on this property is there's a lot of well-drained soil. That's the grayish tone. The black area is a wetland, and then the other soil types are in between those two. Now, once you begin to approximately locate where the drainage ways need to be, you still have to do soil borings, and those will help you fine-tune where you put your drainage ways. And this is all surface water management, no pipes, and that is extremely beneficial for trying to achieve the phosphorus and sediment removal rates that you're looking for in order to maintain high water quality downstream. We had a little bit of tile line issues on the site. This is just to show you that you have to pay attention to this also. The drainage ways themselves, as much as possible in a conservation development, you want to work with the existing drainage ways and the existing contours. This helps to save money at the grading stage, but in addition to that, if you can use the existing drainage ways and contours and not alter them significantly, you maintain the soil structure and the infiltration capacity of those locations. In addition to that, you recreate something that's more natural looking, and that becomes more of an amenity for the site. You can see there's a main drainage way that goes from the northeast corner of the property all the way down to the southwest corner. At this point here, I'll just step away and speak up. At this point, the water flows beneath J, I think right here, and then back over here into a road ditch, and that road ditch extends down to the south branch of the Kinnickinnick. Another thing you'll notice here is there's a major watershed divide. That separates the property into two hydrological units. On the east side, the water flows east, and on the west side, the water flows west. There are a couple of places where already water is ponding. And so your natural inclination in conservation design would be to utilize those places as part of your stormwater management system. Steep slopes are another important consideration. Red are extremely steep, yellow are moderately steep. This was computer generated off of the 2-foot contours. Natural features of the site. Conservation development design is intended, as I said, to provide that balance between the need for people to have places to live, but also the need for wildlife to continue to have places to persist, and we enjoy wildlife. We hunt it, we fish it. It has benefits to us as well. There are oaks. What's remarkable about this site is it's pretty much a 140 acres of cropland. And yet we were still able to find remnants of natural habitat on site, and then, more importantly, connect those and create something better than existed before. This is an example of one of those remnants. Along the north property line are old oak trees and oaks that are trying to seed in along the fence line. On the property, as I mentioned, is a remnant wetland. The center of it is dominated by a native plant called river bulrush. There's cottonwoods on the east side, which you see here. And in addition to that, we were surprised to find a remnant of oak savanna habitat, scattered oak trees. And on the lower right, some of you may recognize that winter color of little blue stem grass and big blue stem grass, that nice coppery color that it gets in the middle of the winter time. Here is the southern end of that main drainage way that I spoke to you of that goes diagonally through the site. Notice in the distance a flat, elevated area. That is a berm that was constructed in the 1970s. The water apparently spills around that to the east in extremely high water years and flows through this gradually descending swale until it reaches the culvert at the road. This is also a very important part of the property because as you come north from the south branch of the Kinnickinnick and make a right turn to go into Hammond on J, this is your view shed. So this would be a place where, if possible, you'd want to push the houses back away from so that people can continue to enjoy what seems to be a more of a rural aspect, especially next to the elk farm. There are view sheds, there are views on the property itself. Here's a beautiful view you get from that oak savanna remnant. So here you can see the potential to preserve oak savanna as well as combine it with something that is an amenity for the people on the property. There are some planted pines on a high knoll on the east side of the property. And then to summarize all of this, here are the different natural habitats or semi-natural habitats that still exist on the site. Not a whole lot there. Another very important feature of the ordinance is the buffer requirements. Setbacks from agricultural land of at least 100 feet, from active animal agriculture of 300 feet, and from the wetland as well, the yellow buffer. Here's a summary of the view shed information. There you see in the upper left the view shed from the Oak Savanna remnant. The highest point of ground is in the far upper right. There is the pine stand. They're halfway down on the right side. And then here is the view shed in the southwest corner looking into the site. Now, when you begin to pull this all together, you bring into the ordinance calls for basically 3 different types of areas on a piece of property. The first type is the buildable zone. That's the red zone. If we were to overlay all of those previous maps, what you would see is none of the natural features, or very few of the natural features, fall in there. Very few of the steep slopes are in there. The drainage way is not in this zone. And so really those are the optimal building sites on the property if you go through this exercise. The green areas are the primary conservation areas. Those are the most important areas on the site. So they contain all of those remnants of natural habitats that I spoke of earlier, as well as some of the other features, including the drainage way. And lastly was the intermediate. You can skip to the next one. Intermediate was the secondary conservation areas, and those are places where you have flexibility. You can put homes in them or not if you want to, as your design evolves. This is the result. And I'll just show you a couple of features of this, and then I'll be finished. The first thing you want to notice is that drainage way is intact. In addition to that, notice that we have management of surface stormwater in those same locations where there are low points on the topography already. And through the engineering design, we bring the water to those locations over the surface of the land rather than through pipes. Also notice that the wetlands and the prairie area in the northwest, prairie you can't see on there, but it is up there just below those lots, those are now connected with plantings, permanent perennial planting, to expand the wildlife habitat in the area. And in fact, all of the area between the lots is going to be put into permanent vegetation. Another feature of the site is that we wanted to continue agricultural production in the south. And the farmer who has been using the land will continue to use it in the future. A lot of the really wonderful features about the layout itself is, well, one of the main features is you notice not many cul-de-sacs. In fact, there is one. And that makes for a much more integrated neighborhood. People can circulate on the road system and see everyone in their neighborhood, whereas with cul-de-sacs, people tend to come and go and they miss neighbors on other cul-de-sacs. So that's a wonderful thing. This is a park area in the center with a parking area, a picnic structure centrally located. In addition to that, notice the trail system that brings people into the open space and lets them enjoy it as an amenity, and actually helps, in addition to the road system, to build that sense of community at this location. I don't have anything more to say, and if there is time for questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Are there some questions you'd like to ask? Mr. Mortensen.
On that south or the bottom area where it's a lot of green.
This?
Yes, through there. I understand that's cropland yet, and it will be in the future. You know, thinking off a few years, will that always be cropland, and or could it be put into trees for, you know, nature?
Mr. Mortensen, that's a very good question, and there will be a conservation easement placed on that to prevent it from being anything but what it is today. It is not exactly cropland. You're correct that it's agricultural land, but it will be permanent grass. So the farmer will be using it for hay. And that does have some wildlife benefits. Between the haying, grassland birds can nest if they can get in there quick enough and then back out again before the hay mowers come.
Mr. Awesome?
Is this anticipated to be connected to Hammond City Water and Sewer?
No, this will all be private sewer, or the sewer and the water will be on site.
And will it be a community system or will it be individual?
I'm speaking beyond my expertise here, but if one of the developers would like to speak to that.
It will not be a community system. We looked at a community septic system as well as a community water supply system, and at this point, they are not feasible for this property due to financial constraints as well as permitting problems.
I guess I would just raise the point that you have a number of lots in a close concentration and a lot of septic systems together and a lot of wells together. Is that what I gather that design entails?
The septic systems aren't shown on this particular rendition, but the septic systems are not on the parcels themselves. The septic systems are off of the parcels and they're in the common area.
And the water is not, it's between lots, correct?
We've looked at the possibilities of shared well between two lots. In other words, one casing with two pumps. We've not made that decision quite yet. There's some other things that we've got to explore about that.
The lots tend to be above the open space.
Thank you.
Did I see another hand earlier, or was that question answered?
My hand was up, but he answered. He asked the same.
Very good. Mr. Cranmer?
How big are the lots?
They are half-acre lots.
Mr. Strumke?
As we get better and better at infiltrating water versus runoff, which is a good thing, but I believe it can be also a negative impact on such situations as the Kinnickinnick River. If we look at the natural runoff that historically has been going on there, and we, for lack of better words, overdo the infiltration portion of the water that would be coming off an open, relatively open acreage here, do you see any detriment to the actual water? Because not all infiltration comes back out into the Kinnickinnick River through the headwaters or any other mechanisms. It goes deeper. Is that taken into account? I know infiltration is a nice word today, but as we do that more and more, we can actually be hurting the runoff that actually continues to feed our streams and rivers.
You're making a very important point, sir, and in this particular case, we are lucky in that there are a number of impervious layers on the site. And so the infiltration will hit those layers and move laterally close to the surface. So we're lucky. But the thing I did notice about the Kinnickinnick, the South Branch at this location, is it is dry. And and in addition to that, with the agricultural land above here, and this watershed goes further to the north, the amount of time that you have flow after a large rain event or after the spring snowmelt is much shorter currently due to agriculture than it would be if it were in permanent grass. And that's because the grass slows and the soil slows the delivery of the water downstream. So I think that's what would, I think we're actually going to be benefiting things by infiltrating at this particular site.
Okay, if I may just make a comment also on the southern portion there being in permanent grass. Farmland needs crop rotation to minimize how much fertilizer goes on it. If you end up putting it into a program that requires permanent grass in order to continue to farm it as a profit-making enterprise, they're going to be putting fertilizers on there. That, again, promotes the use of fertilizer and works against trying to have phosphorus and other products put in there. So I would only caution putting any issues like that into permanent grassland.
A good discussion. Mr. Hobhager, have we accomplished from this presentation what the committee desired? Or are there more?
I believe so, thank you.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Dr. Chapman. If we could have the lights back on then. And the projector muffled. That's number 6. So let's take up next. It's too early for a break. Let's take up number 3 then. It's labeled New Positions, Planning and Zoning Department. And this must be coming up from Finance, huh? Mr. Kruger?
Yes, it is.
Well, is there a motion that we?
It was approving they're actually not new positions. People are in the same job, and job 1 went from A to A1, and second job went from B to B2. They've done the job. It's the same thing. This has never been approved by the county board, but it was approved in finance last year. So this is something that we caught at a later date. Greg, if you want to add anything, or Chuck?
Well, for purposes of the action to be taken, we're basically focusing on the piece that was mailed out that had this flow chart, are we, and these position descriptions to be approved, or is that what we're doing here? All right, so you're moving the approval of these position descriptions, I take it, to formalize something, and you'll get more of an explanation out here later. Is there a second? Supervisor Wentz seconds it. All right, now we'd take the explanation.
Yeah, essentially what we realized was we had 4 job descriptions, but only 2 positions. What had happened was 2 position descriptions last year had gone through their parent committee and had been approved by personnel in one of the Springstead steps, but had not been brought to the county board. Those 2 positions are the senior planner position and the land information manager position. The 3rd position is an office manager position in planning and zoning. That position right now is vacant because the individual has left the county. That's an optimum time to change the job. So that job description has come to finance from planning and zoning and has been approved by both committees, and those are the 3 changes. So essentially what an action here would do would be to allow planning and zoning department to move ahead with a new office manager position and eliminate 2 positions from the chart of positions in that department, the old GIS planner position and the old planner position. We still have some details that we're going to have to work out because there are some things in the job descriptions that are going to have to get revisited, but we'll do that over the summer.
Mr. Peterson.
Mr. Whiting, what kind of a fiscal note do we have with these 2 positions?
Because the positions hadn't come to the county board, there's no change in their wages for 2006. They'll get reviewed as part of the overall Springstead evaluating of positions, and we'll look at that for any kind of a budget impact for 07. But right now there's no change. The office manager position we have not pointed to figure out what a kind of a pay would be for that. There's going to be some other issues that we have to deal with, but the department does not have any additional funds budgeted for this, so they're going to have to take it out of their current budget.
That was kind of my follow-up question. We have a budget appropriation for the 2006 fiscal year for these 2 positions?
Did I see another question? In that case, are you ready to vote then? All in favor of approving these position descriptions in this chart here should now vote aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. And it passes unanimously. So we'll take up number 4, the resolution approving an amendment to the Town of Hudson zoning ordinance. Supervisor Spear.
I was wondering if I might bring forward some personnel points that Public Protection would like to make at this time before we go to 4.
That's fine.
The committee met and has been discussing the problems of not having a person available for human resources / personnel, somebody to go to. And we discussed this at the committee. In researching it, the county directory that we just received has personnel underneath administration, underneath corporation counsel, underneath the finance department, and also under the finance committee. The rules and bylaws only has it underneath the finance committee. Now I'm wondering, just where do we go with this? Who do we talk to? The sheriff has mentioned it, employees have mentioned it. Who is that one person? The only person nominated, stated as a human services person is in the finance department, formerly personnel. The personnel person is in the corp council, under the corp council. Who do you go to? Where are we now with this?
That sounds like a good question to be reported after a thoughtful consideration. It would be the inclination of the chair to refer that question to the Finance Committee, which is now the committee into which the personnel functions of the Personnel Committee were merged. And so I'll do that and ask for a report absolutely no later, Mr. Kruger, than 2 meetings from now pursuant to our bylaws. Hopefully quicker. If there are folks out there wondering who they should go to, for the moment, they should go to Mr. Whiting, if all else fails. Or to make it a one phone call effort, start with Mr. Whiting. But let's get a considered response for Ms. Spear and the Personnel and the Public Protection Committee pursuant to our bylaws, Mr. Kruger, before 2 meetings have passed. Very good. We will take up the Town of Hudson zoning ordinance, and this comes to us from the Planning and Zoning Committee, I suppose. Mr. Hobhager, are you moving this one as chair?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, and is there a second from Ms. Burry?
I'll second it.
This was mailed to me, and it looked like that. Does anybody want to ask questions or make comments about it before we proceed to act on it? Very good, then we will take a vote on this resolution approving the amendment to the Town of Hudson zoning ordinance to make certain kinds of nursery supply and landscape supply businesses with frontages on state or county highways and allowed use. All who are in favor should now vote aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and it passes unanimously. That takes us to number 5, ordinance amendments to the land use regulations, chapter 17. This must also be coming from planning and zoning. Mr. Hobhager moves it. Is there a second? Mr. Ritz seconds it. Care to tell us what it's about, or are you going to refer to staff, or where do we go?
I would refer this to Mr. Pedrosi.
Let's see if we can find a microphone that works. Yeah, yes.
You know, this one works. It has a nice red light. Good evening.
Good evening.
Back in March, we proposed a sizable package of ordinance amendments, and that package was tabled until June, which we are now at. After we reviewed that package further with our new committee, after they were seated, and we had further discussions about needed ordinance amendments with Corp Counsel and a time frame that was workable for everybody involved. We had further discussions with the Planning and Zoning Committee, who recommended that we bring forward just these 5 minor technical amendments from that March package today. The extended formatting and correction types of amendments that were in the package in March, we will continue to review after this meeting with Corp Counsel. package all of those up in one nice, neat, tidy package for the board and bring that back hopefully as soon as August, but certainly in another meeting or two. And just since March, we probably have had 2 or 3 other more policy-oriented ordinance amendments that will need our attention during the balance of the year, including such things as new rules for siting livestock operations, which will require some further adjustment. So we see 3 sort of steps in our ordinance activity this year, passing these 3 amendments, which all have some bearing on the current construction season, are being recommended by the staff and committee tonight.
Supervisor Lucky.
I have several questions on 1713-3A on page 1 of your handout, or I guess it's the resolution. Well, no, it's the handout. It says proposed amendments to Chapter 17 zoning ordinance. Okay, this one talks about no principal structure shall be more than 35 feet in height. And my first question is, if you build a pole shed on your lot or your land, can it be then 35 feet in height because it's the principal structure?
I'm not sure when a pole shed would be a principal structure. Principal structure is, in most properties in the county, are going to be the residence.
Well, where do you define what principal structure is? Because if you go to principal use, it says the primary purpose for which a lot or parcel is used. So, and when you look up the definition of structure, it just talks about, you know, a building or something like that. So it kind of looks like if you put those two together, if all you put on your lot was a pole shed, that you could have that be 35 feet high, which in the first amendment above that, you're wanting to limit a building like that to 20 feet in height. So it sort of looks like a person could come through the back door on you and go for the pole shed first, and then the house later, and I don't know, maybe they'd have to ask for a variance, but they, you know, boards are not too keen on telling people to tear things down.
Well, I think at this juncture, we've tried to improve this where the language has said no building, so it's clear that we're referring to principal structure, and we're making the distinction in this clause, in this provision, with the principal structure on the property versus accessory structures in the language in the item up above. And our goal here was also to clarify and revise 2.5 stories to be 35 feet so that it was clear there was an actual footage dimension to operate with.
Well, without a definition for what you mean by principal structure, it certainly looks like somebody could do the pole shed. And then the next question related to that would be, does that also apply to a commercial or an industrial building?
Okay. Sorry for not anticipating the question, but we do have we're adding the definition above for principal use because to make a distinction between use and structure. We do have an existing definition of principal structure in the ordinance, which reads the main building or other structure on a lot that is utilized for the property's principal use. Principal structure includes attached garages and porches.
I share a concern. I don't know if this was your point also, Ms. Spear. If it was, I'll let you speak to it. No, okay, there'll be another issue. Assume for a moment a vacant lot, and the very first structure for which a building permit is sought is a 35-foot pole building. And of course, if we pass this, that would be allowed. Assume the next week the applicant applies for a 35-foot residence. That would then be the principal structure. And in an ag residential district, you'd say, ha-ha, that's its highest and best use. Is that the term, Wally? That's clearly the principal structure. So now we have an applicant who has two 35-foot structures, one of which is a pole building, which our intent was clearly that pole buildings wouldn't be more than 20 feet high, or the accessory buildings would not be 20 feet high. So simply by timing the order of the construction process on a vacant lot, we could end up with something that is not what any of us intended without ever having a variance. Surely there must be a way to avoid that. We in fact had at the Board of Adjustment just last month an application to build a tall building. It required, and it was the first on a vacant lot, and person said they didn't plan a house at this time, but they were not prepared to say they would never build a house. So it's not an academic concern, I think. Pardon me for speaking to the issue. If somebody else wishes to, go ahead and proceed. Do you wish to speak more about it, Ms. Lucky? Or shall we hear from Ms. Spear's point?
Sorry. I have another question about this same item. You are striking out the language that tells you how you measure the 35 feet in height. And I do recall that in past years, that language had been added because everyone was fighting over where you started measuring the height. So I just wondered how, where are you going to start the measuring? And is that written in somewhere else so that we don't need to be concerned about it?
Bob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that is treated in general in another area in the ordinance. That's why we took it out of this particular reference so that we had it in one general spot that would apply to all measurements.
Ms. Lucky?
Yeah, I guess I continue to be troubled by 1713-3A. So I would like to make a motion to amend this resolution to leave that wording as it is for the time being, to allow the staff and committee to revisit the language for this item.
To see if the chair understands that you're proposing no change to 17.13.3A at this time. That's the nature of the amendment. Is there a second to that amendment? Mr. Raymond seconds it. Is there any other discussion on the amendment before we deal with the vote on the amendment? Do you want to, that would essentially say no change in that part of our ordinances today. Presumably the committee could bring it back at a different time and explain exactly as they have or in different fashions. Any discussion before we vote on the amendment? The amendment to make no change to that one section there. All in favor of the amendment should now vote aye. 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 Opposed, nay. Nay. The amendment passes. Ms. Spear, I think you had a point to make.
It is rather vague, and it was opposed prior to the March 8th meeting, open meeting. Unfortunately, at that meeting, the Ag Center filled up with people who wanted to speak to the Cedar Way Raceway. And a lot of people were standing in the hallway and could not even get in. There were about 4 variances that were heard that evening. So on March 22nd, the county board supervisor, excuse me, Mortensen and myself made a motion to table this. I find it coming back now, and in that tabling, we said that we would like to have adequate time for publication and public hearings. There have not been any public hearings since that March 22 meeting in regards to these issues. I'm very disappointed that it's come back to us now, and it's still the same as it was before, except for the non-conforming structure that was taken out as per our Corp Council's wishes.
Any other points of discussion on this amended ordinance? Mr. Raymond?
Yeah, I think 2 things. One is certainly to the public hearing issue. The changes that were made here, or we removed items that were reviewed at the public hearing, does that require us to have another public hearing, or has this passed the public hearing test, the material that's here now?
All of the items that are before you this evening were a part of the amendments reviewed and presented at the public hearing in March, and there were no comments, no objections. In fact, there might have been a positive comment or 2 on the change in the accessory structure height at that hearing in March. We have not changed these particular amendments at all since that hearing.
Okay, so we're in our rights of going forward with this without another additional public hearing. Okay, second question. Supervisor Lucky brought up the possibility of a 35-foot pole shed, and I think Chairman Malik brought up the fact that you could then come in for a house permit. What elements in the ordinance prohibit that from occurring? I heard discussion. I didn't see any evidence that could not occur. And if we pass the ordinance, am I right in assuming that 35-foot pole shed could occur?
Well, with the amendment that was adopted a few moments ago, that's pulled out of this change. So there would be no change to the existing ordinances in respect of that issue.
Okay.
That's not on the table at this time.
So there's nothing in the ordinance now that would allow this 35-foot pole shed to occur. Okay.
Mr. Awesome.
Thank you. I have a couple of points that I'd like to raise, and they are sort of tangential to this. First of all, the last presentation on conservation design I thought was very helpful, and I thank the committee for bringing it to us. And the second point is there is a proposed technical amendment that was not brought forth as part of this package, and I discussed it this evening with Mr. Ferdosi. And that has to do with making the setback for new and existing construction standards the same. Apparently, under the new construction setbacks, that's 50 feet from the roadway, and under the existing, there's 150. And I only raised the point tonight, and I ask the chair and the Planning and Zoning Committee to consider making and examining that a priority. I've had several constituents approach me about that same subject, and they have been trying for some time to build and haven't been able to, and have been waiting for this to be brought forward. And I don't want to put words in Mr. Ferdosi's mouth, but I think it is on their agenda to do so, and I would ask the committee to look at it and make it a priority to bring forward next time. So, excuse me for my tangent off the subject. Thank you.
Any other discussion or points to be made before we vote on the amended motion? Mr. Cranmer.
I was wondering if Supervisor Spear could talk to which portion of the proposed series of amendments to the zoning ordinance she was discussing when she was began. Her microphone was off and I couldn't follow what she said.
Would you care to say it again?
Fine. Oh, okay. That's why that happened, yes, thank you. No. It's in regards to the disturbance limitations within the shoreline district. It is stated that it's only a certain amount, 25% greater slope measured at a horizontal distance of 50 feet. And then it goes on to another one. And builders and developers are saying that to have that so concise, they do not have any ability then to flow with a development within the lines of the shoreline and still not disturb the slopes. They may disturb the number, but they're not going to disturb the slope itself. And they feel that that's a little bit too strict. And they didn't feel that they had a chance to speak to it in the at the 8th public hearing, because that one was, well, there were people standing out in the driveway. They couldn't get into the ag building that night. I think you all remember that. Is that enough of an answer?
Mr. Chairman, I need to make a correction here. Now, I was at that hearing on March the 8th, and I'm sorry, it was a full house there, but it was by no means a packed room. There was a lot of area in that room for people to come in there. And anyone who is, if they'd have come forward at all and let us know, we would have certainly made arrangements to get them in so that we could hear what they had to say, if that were the case. Thank you.
Well, are there any other points to be made before we vote on this amendment? Sounds like we've talked it over pretty well. So all who are in favor of the changes to the ordinance as we have the amended motion should now vote aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. And the chair declares that it has passed. Thank you. I think we could take a break at this time, and then we'll come back and talk about the state trust fund loan. Well, we got something done.
Yeah,
we got a lot done. Those are.
I can't say we needed that 21
by $54,000, and that is because we have done some center line mapping through planning and zoning that we won't need that expense added to this loan numbers. So the new amount is $663,274.
So we don't have to change anything. My form of the motion is, of course, we're following the state's paperwork. This is that thing that starts out, Commissioners of Public Lands, that was in your mailing. Back on the third page of it is actually where the motion is. It says, therefore be it resolved that the County of St. Croix, Wisconsin borrow from the trust funds of the state of Wisconsin the sum of, as Mr. Kruger just said, $663,274 for the purpose of purchasing a jail water control system, cellular E911, fire radio repeaters, and emergency communication radio consoles, and for no other purpose. Is there a second for this motion? Supervisor Wentz seconds it. Okay, this is probably familiar to you from last month, but any questions or discussion? It's $54,000 less. The amount has already been corrected in the form that was written and the one that's was unanimously approved by the Finance Committee. Mr. Strumke.
I'm curious as to what's the period of time we're looking at borrowing this?
It's in here. Yep.
Set in stone until it's 5 years, it says.
Any other questions? We should have roll call vote on this. Supervisor Lucky?
somebody refresh my memory what I see we have an outstanding principal balance of 15,000 on something else, and could you refresh my memory what that was?
15 million.
Okay, 15, whatever it is.
Are you withdrawing the question?
No.
What is the question again then?
Oh, on the last page where we certify
That's our current outstanding debt, which includes refinancing this building. Refinancing this building, the Huber addition, the lawsuit settlement, both our share and Wemmick's share.
And refinancing.
Any other questions?
And the prior year service at the state retirement system.
Mr. Peterson.
When you borrow this sum of money, how close are we to the cap of the amount of money that the county can borrow versus its valuation?
We're well below that.
Well below that, because I'm going to be looking for some money.
As the lawyers say, strike that. All right, are you ready to vote on this, Mr. Strump?
Well, for hopefully not making a faux pas here on this question, I can't find anywhere where it says how many years it's going to take, I mean, how much the annual payments are going to be. Do we have an approximate? I mean, if it's 4.5 and it's 663 over 5 years, we ought to be able to program that out with a calculator pretty quick.
198,000 roughly.
It's roughly $198,000 a year for 5 years annually.
Any other questions before we vote? Where does the roll call begin, Madam Clerk?
Supervisor Burry.
Supervisor Burry, you're, just giving you a heads up. But her vote is yes.
Brian Hurton.
Yes.
Julie Spear.
Yes.
Joel Hurton. Bill Peavy.
Yes.
Gerald Peterson.
Yes.
Charlie Grant.
Yes.
Tom Dowd.
Yes.
Chuck Mills.
Yes.
Richard King.
Yes.
Wallace Halbhager.
Yes.
John Mortensen.
Yes.
Esther Wentz.
Yes.
Gene Ritz.
Yes.
Gordon Awesome.
Yes.
Tom Kaflish.
Yes.
Chuck Strumke.
No.
Richard Marzloff.
Yes.
Sharon Norton Bauman.
Yes.
Ron Troyer.
Yes.
Roger Rebholz.
Yes.
Bill Cranmer.
Yes.
Daryl Standifer.
Yes.
John Borup.
Yes.
Clarence Malick.
Yes.
Ron Raymond.
Yes.
Cindy Leonard.
Yes.
Linda Lucky.
Yes.
Stan Kruger.
Yes.
Denise Gunderson.
Yes.
29-1.
The motion passes. The next item is the budget review, and this is a report from the Finance Committee, essentially, Mr. Kruger.
Yes, if people would look at your,
Microphone.
Thank you. I'll get used to it after a period of time. If you look at our levy history, I just wanted to show you could see that how our levy has gone down in dollar amounts. However, we did have some bad years, 2000, 2002, and 2001, 2002, and 2003, where we had a 14% increase. Now, because of the fact of the levy limit is still in effect, we're looking at that we only can exceed our levy limit by new construction, which last year was 1 million roughly, but we had over $3 million, over $6 million when our first budgets came in that we started working with. So if we're looking at that, we only know that we have one position coming in new at this time, which is the drug court coordinator. We also know that the highway department has taken really a hit with the cost of materials, namely because of the petroleum industry and the cost of they need for tar and things like that. So we got an increase. We do have 3 collective bargains agreements that have been settled with a 2 and a 1. And the non-representatives were a 1.5, and we still have 1 outstanding that's headed for arbitration. But our levy increase, the maximum we could do if we have a 6% levy increase would be $1,335,741. But the mill rate has dropped over the last number of years.
Thank you. Anybody want to cross-examine Mr. Kruger? Guess you're getting off easy. Next, let's take the reports. Tonight's major report from the Health and Human Services Board and Department. Is there anything that the newly elected chair of the Health and Human Services Board wishes to say in introduction? Would that be Mr. Fred Johnson, who is now making his way to the podium here? Lectern. Fire number. Ambulance driver. Ole and Lena.
I guess that would be me. Thank you. I'm here for the 2005 annual report for Health and Human Services and the St. Croix Health Center. I'm going to see if this slideshow will work. We'll get the show on the road. Yeah, doesn't look like it's going to work. The previous gentleman had some difficulty as well. Chuck, are you going to assist me?
Would you coordinate that, Joe?
I appreciate it. That works. We recently, actually earlier this week, had our open hearing, and I think you'll notice I handed out earlier a copy of our annual report, and as an attachment there was some comments that were written comments that we retyped for you with regard to the St. Croix Health Center. And those 4 comments are for your reading pleasure later, but they highlight this slide, which indicates our residents don't live in a facility, we work in their home. We receive very good feedback with regard to the care that the residents at the St. Croix Health Center Nursing Home receive. With that, there still are some trends in the nursing home, and this is an exact slide that was shown last year, and these trends continue. One is a federal push for small hospitals to be designated as critical access, which basically allows hospitals to keep residents longer that typically would have been nursing home residents. And then in addition, I'll talk probably a little bit in long-term support when we hit that portion of the presentation about relocation, but the plans remain in effect for Wisconsin to relocate or discharge folks 25% over the next 8 years. This is just a quick overview of admissions and discharges. This should highlight the fact that many of our residents come in for rehab. We had 47 admissions and 56 discharges. Just a quick overview of payer mix. We have 75% are paid via Medicaid, 7% Medicare, and 18% private pay. And that's been close to previous percentages for bed pay mix in previous years. Here's a couple of things you'll note with regard to discharge. Again, with more admissions, we do have folks going home that have rehabilitated. Next slide is fine. You'll note, again, most of our admissions are coming directly from hospitals, some from home, and then other is just kind of a conglomeration, but a low number. One of the things I would note in 2004, our average daily census was 70.58, and in 2005 it was 69.25. So even with that decrease in referrals from the hospitals, our average daily census was relatively stable. Approximately 30% of our residents have cognitive or mental disorders. Others, the balance, are medical conditions, those that need some rehabilitation. This is just some additional information with regard to the nursing home. Like many other nursing homes in the state and across the state, we have a certain percentage that are court-appointed guardians as well as protectively placed. Next service area is family and children's. Again, that is a pretty self-explanatory mission that deals primarily with safety. In the family and children's area, we have primary governing statutes of Chapter 48, which is the Children's Code, and that is the code that deals primarily with your child abuse and neglect issues. Chapter 938 is the Juvenile Justice Code, and that deals with those youth under the age of 17 that have gotten themselves into some sort of trouble. Some of the other key services you can read there, foster care, alternate care. There are times when kids need to be removed from their home. Kinship care, that deals with relatives that will take in their kin, their relatives of the young kids that need a home. We utilize that service heavily. Independent living deals primarily with those youth that are placed out of their home and are aging out of the system and need assistance with developing independent living skills. Family resources are parent aides that work very closely with families in conjunction with social workers. Coordinated Family Services is a new initiative we talked about, I believe, last year briefly, but Coordinated Family Services is a agency-wide effort primarily located in family and children's and mental health, and we tap into other agency and natural support systems for families, come together and try to work with families on a voluntary basis. We're providing the service that it's for mandated clients, but they have to volunteer into the program and basically work in a wraparound fashion, so bring the key players to the table to work with those families. It's geared primarily towards those youth that we believe are at high risk for out-of-home placement. SED waivers, I'll cover that in another slide, but that is another program that we administer. You can see our alternate care admissions, and this deals with a whole host of placements, but in 2005, I think we had approximately 260 admissions. You'll note, you don't need to go back, but the previous year we were up a little bit in admissions, and that is primarily related to short-term shelter care placements. Those are more of a crisis-oriented placement that happens on occasion when we get calls and kids need to be removed for safety purposes. Now you'll notice that the alternate care days actually went up in 2005 as compared to 2004. Again, that primarily has to do with the fact that many of the placements from last year, those 46, were probably very short-term placements, where this year the number of days didn't fluctuate in comparison to the actual admissions. I think I explained that correctly. One thing on that slide I just want to highlight is that the admissions deal with placements that range from foster care to correctional placements, the whole array of admissions. When we do not have enough resources locally, we'll utilize treatment foster care that's private. Some are for-profit, some are not-for-profit facilities. We have group homes, residential care facilities. Sometimes it's because we don't have a local resource. Sometimes it's because the needs of the youth require more supervision than what a foster home might be able to handle. I'll just make a plug for our foster care program that currently we have in a county of approximately 75,000 people. We have 25 to 30 licensed homes, which is a low number. And if anybody's interested in learning more about our foster care program, they can certainly contact our foster care coordinator, whose name is John Brettel. John's number is 246-6991. I'm going to take a chance to plug that because it's a very fulfilling program, and we can certainly connect you up with foster parents who can tell you so. This slide deals with reports of child abuse. We received 881 actual reports, and that's the upper line. And the full assessments, we assessed 462 of those cases. Now you may wonder why there's a discrepancy between the two numbers, and that can be for multiple reasons. One such reason would be a case might already be open for services for the reason in which a caller is referring it to our agency. We oftentimes will receive multiple referrals on the same case. Reporters don't necessarily always know who's calling in a report. They wouldn't know from us. So we have to tabulate those and do work with regard to entering the intake, but we don't do actual full assessments on all cases. The other thing I would highlight with regard to these is that when a report comes in, it isn't a matter of just taking a phone call and saying, oh, I think I'm going to screen that case out and not assess it. There's a protocol that we go through to review that information, and it isn't as simple in those 881 cases. For those that we don't assess fully, there is a fair amount of work that goes into recording that information and assuring that that report can be safely screened out. A juvenile intake is for those individuals that have had referrals for a variety of reasons: burglary, criminal damage to property, age 17 and under. You'll note in 1995 and 96 that the number was substantially higher, and that's when the law changed. I don't remember the specific date, but that's when the law changed from age 18 down to age 17. So 17 and above are treated as adults for purposes of, they're not a delinquent anymore, they're treated in adult court. But that trend is going up slightly, 791 referrals as compared to 741 in 2004. Just to put those numbers into perspective, in both, we're receiving approximately 15 to 16 referrals each week on youth in our community that someone is concerned about, or law enforcement or schools have referred to our office for a variety of reasons. The SED waiver I had mentioned earlier, that's one of the new children's waivers. Became available for counties to utilize in 2003, and we began utilization. SED refers to children that are severely emotionally disturbed. What this represents, and I want to highlight this, is that by recouping these waiver funds, which are federal dollars, we're able to offset what would have traditionally been county levy expenditures. So we've reorganized a little bit in 2005 to allow more staff time to work on these particular cases that are already mandated to be served within our agency. We're just able to leverage federal dollars now to help offset some of the cost via case management, as well as for placement costs such as foster care and treatment foster care. I think they have to be in a facility that's, they can't be a group home or residential, must be a community-based facility. Talk briefly about public health. You can read the vision and the mission statement. Key to note, it's a population-based services, so we all benefit from public health services. These are the governing statutes that really identify the core functions and the essential services that the health department is charged with. On the outside, you'll see assessment, policy development, and assurance. Those are the core functions of our public health department. And on the inner circle, you'll see the essential services, again referenced back to the previous slide. If you go to the next slide, Chuck, this is how our public health department has defined the essential services in St. Croix County. I shouldn't just say our public health department, but the Health and Human Service Board as well. Whoops, maybe I missed a slide there. Oh, that's fine, you can go on to the next one. That just identifies some numbers of clients that have received a variety of services within our public health department. Not all of them, but some of the key services. Talk briefly about mental health and alcohol and drug abuse. This slide represents provided and purchased services, so we have a mix, as we do in many of the departments in Health and Human Services. One of the things that's key in terms of cost for our department is those acute psychiatric inpatient services. Couple of key points. The average cost is $900 a day for hospitalizations. 2004 and 2005 numbers dipped to levels seen in 2002. We had a year in 2003 where the cost and the number of admissions was quite high, and you'll see that on the next chart. I believe we had approximately 290 admissions. Most of those come through the sheriff's department or law enforcement when an individual is deemed to be unsafe by that law enforcement officer. Involuntary admissions references those folks that the county accept responsibility for and on a voluntary basis admits. That doesn't count folks that have private insurance and decide they might need some assistance on their own. Long-term support is the next slide that deals with our mission. I should note that we are in the process of some strategic planning in Health and Human Services, and my suspicion is this mission will be revised a bit. A couple of things I'd like to mention with regard to long-term support. It's no small task that 6 county residents were returned to the community from Northern Center in Chippewa Falls, and we no longer have any residents at Northern Center. 24 children were served via the new children's waiver. There's the SED waiver that I referenced previously, and there's also the new autism waiver. There's 24 youth that were served there. There's an intensive benefit that typically runs for youth ages 3 to 9, and I believe will run for 3 years. Approximate costs are $100 a day. After they're through that program, they can go into a longer-term program where they will receive benefits ongoing that are at the cost of approximately $30 a day. One thing that I think from the open hearing last year our board did listen to and we took to heart is that we continue to have wait list issues in St. Croix County, and we may not be able to resolve that in one fell swoop. But what we did is we did some partial slot funding with youth that were receiving a respite benefit. So we took the county money there and partially, in what we call a partial funded slot, and leveraged that county money to access more federal money so that we could meet some more needs back home. We didn't necessarily expand the number of youth served, but we were able to, within that family, leverage a little more money and provide a little more services. In addition, I talked previously about nursing home relocation. Nursing home relocation in long-term support, you'll see that at the time that this report was completed, 9 persons were served through the nursing home relocation program. So those individuals that were in nursing homes that applied to be relocated, we've relocated 9 of them out of 105 in the state, so we aggressively pursued that, fully funded state slots. And then there was 1 person being diverted. Ron Lockwood and I were at a meeting today, and I think there's 2 more that have been diverted and probably 4 or 5 more that are being relocated. So those aren't just from the St. Croix County Health Center, those are from all nursing homes within St. Croix County. This is a quick overview of a lot of information with regard to long-term support waivers and case management. You can see the oops. Chuck's moving us right along. There's a basketball game on tonight? Okay. You can see a total of 357 people were served through long-term support case management services for the variety of waivers and a few that just received case management. Each of these programs represents individuals that meet certain criteria, and I won't go into the details, but meet certain criteria in order to receive waiving the traditional medical assistance requirements to fund people in a variety of settings, typically outside of nursing homes. Yeah, Buzz.
Can you explain what the acronyms CIP and COP refer to?
Yeah, Community Intervention Program and Community Options Program. Those deal primarily with elderly and younger physically disabled individuals. That's referring to the KIP 2 COP W. KIP 1B, I made some notes here to make sure I kept it straight in my head. KIP 1B deals primarily with developmentally disabled, and KIP 1A is dealing with that population that is being relocated from the centers that I had mentioned earlier. Birth to 3 is part of our long-term support program. It's early intervention. You can see the types of services that are provided for those youth that are identified that have a significant delay. Most of those referrals come from doctors. We had 164 referrals and deal with approximately 70 to 75 youth at any given point in time. And they'll receive a variety of services, some provided, some purchased. We also operate St. Croix Industries, and there's 3 major programs there that you can reference: the work services program, the community employment, and the day services, and you can see that we serviced 176 individuals. Primarily that wait list for work services is due to no funding for those individuals and lack of room. We can only accommodate so many individuals in our work services program. Economic support, that's the department that provides benefits and assistance. These are the various programs that are provided. There's more detail on each of these programs provided in your handouts. I think it's always an interesting entitlement number to at least look at and know how much money flows through that office. Medical assistance in 2004 was $37 million, and in 2005 it's just short of $33 million. A couple of notes there. In 2005, income and assets, there were more requirements. More requirements. Instead of self-reporting, we had to verify, and that was a change in requirements of the program in 2005. In addition, the medical assistance HMO was discontinued in St. Croix County. Fee-for-services actually ends up costing less than the premiums that were being paid. So that's in part why you see about a $4.2 million reduction. Caseloads, however, on the next slide, Chuck, have crept up a little bit. Each of our staff have approximately 525 cases each. So there's a very high caseload in our economic support unit. This will give you just a quick glance, and there's more detail in your report with regard to human services revenues for 2005, a little over $27 million in revenues. 3 primary categories are collections, federal and state, and then obviously county appropriations, a generous portion of county appropriations. You can see, and in your report, there's more detail broke out in terms of expenses, but you'll note that our expenses were about $26,700,000, which leaves approximately a $400,000 fund balance that currently is an unaudited fund balance. We're still waiting for our long-term support final reconciliation. The auditor, Steve Tracy, should be at our next Health and Human Service Board meeting, July 17th, to provide audited numbers, but at this time, even though we delayed this annual report 1 month, we still are dealing with unaudited numbers, but there have been some adjustments made. In terms of the nursing home, 5.6 million in revenue, and you can look at the details to where the revenue source came from: private pay, Medicare, Medicaid. Another significant one is intergovernmental transfer, available only to county homes. And then obviously county appropriations make up the bulk of our revenues. Expenditures were 5.5 million, leaving a fund balance of approximately $81,000. And that is the end of our slide. I end with the financials, but I just want people to know that the numbers up here that we have covered tonight quickly do deal with human services, human needs. They really do meet human needs in our county. And by that I'm referencing folks that may in fact be your neighbors, maybe your friends, maybe in some cases family. But this quick overview of programs really does address human needs within our county. And there's a generous portion of county levy that goes to support our programs. And I'm grateful for that, and I appreciate the opportunity to present tonight. And I think that's about all of the information I have to share with you. I just encourage you to take a look at the annual report, the comments from the nursing home, as well as a new brochure that we updated so you can have a little more detail with regard to the services we provide. Any questions?
Mr. Mills?
Two questions, Fred. If a person violates a provision of a bond and subsequently has to be transported to, let's say, Cumberland, the Sheriff's Department does the transporting, let's say, if they're there for 72 hours, the county essentially pays for that, at least initially?
The answer to your first question is yes, law enforcement would do a transfer for a person that might be determined to be of concern that they might injure themselves. Cumberland could be one of the facilities we utilize.
Your contract with several, but is that charged back to the violator then at some point in time?
What we'll do is we have contracts with the hospitals where they will bill or attempt to bill the client first, and if they have insurance, then we'll never see a bill as a county. If they don't have insurance and aren't eligible for medical assistance, then the county will receive that bill. We will certainly attempt to bill the individual, but oftentimes those are accounts receivables that are pretty difficult to collect.
You know offhand what the cost would be, minus counseling up at that end, I suppose, for 72 hours, or just a wild figure?
Well, just, probably about $3,000. If you take, approximate cost of $900 to $1,000 per day, yeah, it creeps up very quickly.
So that 900 applies to that. Second, I forgot, I think it had to do with Alzheimer's. Oh, I'm sorry, the autism. The autism waiver program, is some of that funded by state or federal?
The autism benefit is 100% state funded, yes.
Mr. Strumke?
I'm just looking at page 6 here where it talks about the juvenile offenses on juvenile intake.
Sure.
And I'm just curious here it's got a chart that shows the offenses comparable 2005 and 2004. On the bottom it says offense totals. Are these adjudicated and final to be found that they were offenses, or are these just the ones that were referred to you with a possible offense?
Yes, just referred.
Okay, is there a way on all of them, your assessments and all that, do you track what the final results of these juvenile intakes are and the other assessments you do? Or do you just track what comes to you and what you do with it?
So you're looking at the actual number of youth in a given year that may have actually gone through a full court process to track a little bit more detail?
Yeah, just so we can see, if we're getting a lot more people referred to you, maybe unjustifiably so, because I don't know where our mechanism would be unless it's through district attorney's office or someplace. But you do assessments, and not all of your assessments, it's just a question now, I may be wrong, but not all of your assessments ends up going to court, is that correct?
You're absolutely right.
And so we don't really know how many of these that you're doing all this work for as a percentage are being legitimate, if I would use that word, and it may not be the correct one. Is there some way we can get that data?
Yes, there is a way. All of the offenses that are referred to juvenile intake are referred to the district attorney's office after an intake decision has been made. So that intake decision may be to counsel and close, to open up a deferred prosecution agreement, to recommend some sort of court action which may involve a consent decree and or a full adjudication, and that would be statistical information we'd have that is not provided in this report, but I can get to you.
And would it also be those that are not referred to the district attorney?
Well, all of them would be referred to the district attorney with an intake recommendation. What I think you're referring to would be those that are referred to the district attorney's office that would say, we're going to recommend counseling and closing with no further action.
Right. I mean, I would assume
There's a percentage of those,
Right.
yes. Absolutely, and I can get that detail and forward it. I don't have it with me at
No,
this
I
point.
understand that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
TPCR on the same page, what does that mean?
Those are the temporary physical custody requests. Boy, I'm glad you asked one acronym that I could answer, because there's lots of them. Yeah, those are the short-term shelters that I referenced earlier. In 2004, I think we had approximately 140, give or take a little bit. And in 2005, I think there was mid-90s. So that can fluctuate from year to year.
Mr. Cranmer?
Yeah, what's the problem with the long-term support holdup and the accounts? Is it the feds or the state or both? What's happening?
The holdup related to long-term care reform, or?
No, I'm talking about the audited results of the,
Oh.
you said that it was a month after the deadline already, and
Well, it was, I don't know that there's I don't want to misinform folks that there's a deadline. Just last year, we had presented this information in May, and we purposely put it back till June, hoping that we'd have audited numbers. I can't speak to the details as to why, other than it always takes a while for the final reconciliation. We're talking about a lot of money that runs through the waivers. The final reconciliation will say what our actual costs were, what other counties' actual costs were. We always make a request at the end of the year. If there are unspent funds in other counties, that those funds could come back to our county, basically to supplant funds, county funds that have been expended. So I don't know at this point what the holdup is.
Mr. Awesome?
Thank you. Fred, the tour that you gave me and the new county board members when we had orientation was very impressive. And one of the things that I remember from that was that we weren't serving quite an extensive waiting list of folks for long-term care. Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, there's an extensive waiting list for long-term support services, yes.
And we hadn't really made a dent in that waiting list in years, is that correct?
That's correct as well.
And if I remember correctly, you told me there was plenty of federal funds available to address most of that, and it was weighted mostly with federal funding, but the county had to come up with their share of it in order to address that?
I don't remember the specifics of that conversation, other than the state and the county, if we come up with local match, we're able to leverage federal dollars. I don't know off the top of my head whether there's a cap on the amount of federal dollars that we can receive. But at this point in time, we have a limit on the number of folks that we can serve based on the county levy that we have in long-term support, as well as the state money that can be used as match for the waiver programs that I highlighted quickly in that chart.
Well, I guess I would make a point in developing the budget for next year. I would like to personally understand that better and how we have to make that decision, since there's all of these folks that aren't getting this care, and I presume that's a lot of children that aren't getting these types of services and elderly, and that's who we're referring to?
There's a mix of individuals in long-term support, children and adults that are on wait lists.
Okay. And then I would like to ask you a question. Is there anywhere in this document that it clearly sets forth what we are funding that is mandated by the state or feds for us to fund versus what is optional?
I don't think you'll find anything in that document that specifies what is a clear mandate versus what is optional. I think when you start talking about mandates, at least from my perspective, it's mandated and then to what level. And we haven't had those conversations as of late with the Health and Human Services Board, but I would argue that the services we provide, while there may be some discretion in how we provide and what we choose to make a priority, they're all mandated to some level or another. It's just a matter of degrees. The other thing I think that can help with that is in our 2006 process, as I had mentioned, we're doing some strategic planning to look at what in fact are our priorities. What can we continue to fund? What might be some of the things that we need to take a look at and potentially make some recommendations to the Health and Human Services Board that given the era of tight funding, we may want to look at making less of a priority. But I would argue that the bulk of these programs have mandates behind them.
Well, I guess I would again just say I'd like to understand better what our level of mandate is as we evaluate the new budget, because I simply don't understand it. And then another question is the collections, those are for fees such as health inspections for restaurants and things. Is that what our collections revenues are?
That would be included in our collections, fee-for-service for clients and receiving outpatient services, families that have co-pays for alternate care services. It's a whole host of things.
And does it include the intoxicated driver program? Do we assess those drivers for their assessment? Do we give them a bill for it?
Yes, and it would be included in that collections number.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. You lived up to your billing, I think. Made the best of a complex subject, and we appreciate that. I'm sure I speak for all of us. What do we have by way of County Clerk's report of correspondence and rezoning requests?
New rezoning applications submitted but not scheduled for hearing. John and Georgine Schottler, Town of St. Joseph, Egg to Egg Residential. Ken Graff, Town of Baldwin, Egg to Egg Residential. Couple announcements.
Announcements?
If you're interested in ordering the group photo, please let me know so I can get the number to Margaret Ontel. Tonight, I'd appreciate it.
Tonight?
Yes, please.
I see. Tonight for the group photo. How about the WCA annual conference?
If you're interested in going to the conference, please let me know. Too much sound.
Try to keep your finger on your finger and off the mic.
The deadline to get these in for the reduced rate is August 1st, so I will be reminding you again in July. But if you can let me know now, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.